The morning never really began. It simply unfolded, slow and soft, like a blanket being pulled back from a quiet world. The sky was the color of warm milk, tinted slightly pink with the echo of dreams, and the clouds hung low as if listening. You stepped barefoot from your door, though the ground wasn't cold. The path stretched ahead, not paved, not trodden, but softly waiting, as though it had been grown rather than built. Flowers with translucent petals lined its edges, and when the breeze passed, they shimmered like wind chimes made of moonlight. You didn't need to know where you were going. The world itself seemed to move with you, tilting slightly forward, drawing you along gently. In the distance, small cottages rose and fell like breaths taken by the hills. Each one had a chimney whispering something into the air, vanilla, spice, and the warmth of memories you hadn't yet made. As you passed, no one emerged. But you felt watched in a way that was kind, like being held in a lullaby. A cat padded silently across your path, its fur shimmering with faint stars, and it paused to look at you, not startled, not curious, just knowingly still. You kept walking. The path meandered toward a forest, but the trees were not dark or wild. They arched over you like guardians, and the leaves above made a kaleidoscope of shadows that danced with every step. Inside the forest, time slowed, or perhaps bowed out entirely. You heard nothing but the hush of leaves touching leaves and the occasional drop of dew falling from nowhere to nowhere. Your hands brushed against moss that felt like soft wool, and when your fingers pressed into it, a subtle warmth returned, not from the sun, but from somewhere deeper, older. A clearing opened suddenly, perfectly round, as though someone had cupped the trees in their palms to make space. In its center, a pool mirrored the sky exactly, not just in color, but in motion. The clouds above moved, and so did their reflections, yet not quite the same. In the reflection, the sky turned a deeper blue. In the reflection, stars appeared where none yet lived above. You knelt beside it, and though you didn't reach in, a ripple spread as if your presence was enough. Then the wind carried a sound to you, a bell, small and far away, ringing once every few heartbeats. It wasn't a call. It was an invitation. You stood and followed it. The forest opened further, revealing a wide field of tall grass that glowed silver green. Fireflies bobbed lazily just above the tips, each one pulsing with rhythm rather than light, as though marking the time of a lullaby you once knew. In the distance, the bell rang again. Soft. Clear. You kept walking. The world gave way ahead. At the edge of the field, the grass gave way to smooth, polished stone, pale as moonlight, laid in soft curves rather than hard lines. A staircase spiraled downward, not deep into the earth, but into something quieter. You descended slowly, each step making no sound. Around you, the walls began to hum, not a noise but a sensation, a calm vibration that settled into your bones like the memory of a lullaby. The staircase opened into a room lit by soft orbs that floated like bubbles. They drifted through the air lazily, casting gentle glows across walls that shifted in texture, sometimes like wood grain, sometimes like clouds, sometimes like still water. In the center of the room stood a tree, not tall, not wide, but ancient in its stillness. It bore no leaves, no blossoms, only threads, thousands of delicate threads, silver and weightless, drifting upward from its branches like cobwebs drawn toward the stars. Each thread connected to something unseen above, and though you couldn't see the other ends, you felt them tug very gently, as if the sky itself were breathing through the tree. You sat beside it, not needing to know why, only that it felt like a place you had waited to find. A gentle sound surrounded you, like pages turning, or snow falling on glass, or the moment just before someone speaks a dream aloud. You closed your eyes. You did not sleep. You simply settled. After some time, the orbs began to rise, slowly drifting upward into a dome of soft black above, like stars returning to their places in the sky. You stood. The tree shimmered as you left, its threads singing without sound. Another staircase waited, this one ascending. You climbed. When you reached the top, the world had changed again. You stood at the shore of a great lake, but the water was not water, it was a slow swirl of ink and pearl, rolling gently in spirals that never broke. Boats bobbed quietly at the shore, tied to posts carved with symbols you couldn't read but understood all the same. You stepped into one, and it rocked once beneath your weight, then settled. There were no oars. The boat moved on its own, gliding through the swirling surface without a sound. Around you, strange birds flew with wide, silent wings. Their feathers shimmered like oil on glass, and they left trails of light behind them. One passed close, and for a moment, the world around you smelled like your grandmother's garden, like warm bread, like the inside of a coat on a winter day. The boat turned toward an island that rose gently from the lake like a sigh. Trees grew there, but their branches curled inward, sheltering not fruit, but glowing stones that pulsed in time with your heartbeat. You stepped onto the island, and the sand beneath your feet felt like memory, not soft, not rough, but familiar. A path of rounded stones led toward the center, where a single bench waited beneath a wide tree that seemed to hold up the sky. You sat. Everything hushed. The sky overhead turned lavender. The spiral clouds stilled. The wind held its breath. You sat in stillness that felt like being listened to by the entire world. And then, quietly, the boat was ready again. You stepped back into the boat, and as it began to glide away, you turned once to look behind you. The island faded not into distance, but into mist, as if it had never been separate from the air. The lake shimmered quietly, its currents folding back into themselves like dreams forgetting their endings. The sky deepened to a blue so soft it felt more like emotion than color. You drifted without direction, but with perfect assurance. Eventually, the boat touched shore once more. You stepped out into a place that resembled a city, but one slowed to a dream's heartbeat. Buildings leaned gently toward each other, their walls painted in tones of dusk and candlelight. Windows blinked slowly open and closed, not with shutters, but with drowsy warmth. The streets were paved with tiles shaped like falling leaves, and each footstep you took seemed to send a faint ripple of gold through them. You walked without hurry. The city was quiet, not abandoned, just resting. In one doorway, a lantern flickered softly, and as you passed, it whispered your name. Not aloud, but in a way your chest understood. Farther on, a small bridge arched over a canal, but the water beneath wasn't water. It was shadow and light braided together, and as you crossed it, your reflection looked back at you with a kindness that made your eyes sting. On the other side of the bridge, a child waited, not to speak, not to ask, but simply to hold your hand for a few steps before vanishing like morning fog. You didn't mourn the loss. It was not that kind of moment. It was more like a sigh. You reached a square at the heart of the city, where time moved like molasses in the warmth of afternoon sun. A great clock stood in the center, but it ticked sideways instead of forward, and the hands moved in circles that never repeated. Around the edges of the square were seats, pillows, hammocks, swings that swayed gently without wind. You lay down on a soft mat that smelled of lavender and pages turned long ago. As soon as your back met the fabric, you felt a wave of release. Not sleep. Not yet. Just an exhale so deep it seemed to reach into other lives. Around you, the city's rhythm slowed even more. You felt the world wrapping itself around your shape like a soft cloak. You stayed there for a long time, or no time at all. When you finally stood, the city remained unchanged, waiting for the next dreamer. You returned to a path lined with lamps, each one glowing not with fire, but with small scenes. Someone planting a seed, someone dancing in their kitchen, someone watching snow fall from a quiet window. Each lamp was a moment. Not yours, but offered freely. You stopped before one where two people sat beside each other on a rooftop, sharing silence. The light from that lamp followed you a while, casting a long, comforting shadow. Ahead, an open archway waited, carved from dark wood and curved like a shell. You passed through it and stepped into a hallway filled with warm wind. The walls breathed. The floor sighed. And slowly, softly, you moved forward again. The hallway did not lead straight but curved gently, like walking through the inside of a seashell that hummed with memory. As you moved forward, small doors lined the walls. Some stood open, revealing quiet rooms filled with dreams already in progress, a girl braiding a cloud's hair, a boy riding a comet like a kite, an old woman sipping tea with a forgotten god. You paused at one doorway where the scent of honey and pine drifted out. Inside, a room bloomed with soft moss and cushions that breathed when touched. Music played from no instrument, a tune made of sighs and wind chimes. You watched for a moment, and though there was no one in the room, you felt the weight of 1,000 gentle stories that had once unfolded there. Without entering, you moved on. The next door opened into a library without edges. Its shelves extended outward into the stars, each one filled not with books, but with folded cloth. You picked one up. It was warm, soft, and whispered as you opened it. A scene unwrapped across its threads, you, younger, lying in the grass beneath a tree, a breeze stirring your hair, a feeling of complete okayness that had no reason and needed none. You folded it again and placed it gently back. The library did not require silence, but it encouraged stillness. Somewhere far above, a bell rang once, gently, like a reminder you were still held in the story of the night. You stepped through the next arch. The air beyond smelled like snow and fresh bread. You stood in a kitchen where the walls shifted slowly between memories of places you once called home. A kettle sang softly on the stove. A mug waited on the counter, and when you picked it up, it was filled with a drink that tasted exactly like the warmth you needed. You sat at the table and time curled up beside you like a cat. A candle burned beside you, but the wax never dripped, and the flame didn't flicker, it simply glowed, like something that had decided it didn't need to change to be beautiful. You looked out the window. Snow fell in slow motion, each flake as large and soft as a feather. Across the field outside, a fox wandered, its tail sweeping trails in the snow that spelled stories in a language you had once known in dreams. After a while, you stood, the cup now empty but your hands still warm. The kitchen faded behind you as you walked into a hallway of feathers. They hung from the ceiling, swayed gently as you passed, and whispered things you couldn't quite catch but didn't need to understand. Your feet found steps again, not steep, not long. They spiraled downward, not into darkness, but into softness. As you descended, you heard the sound of waves. Not crashing, not restless. Just the hush of a shore breathing in and out beneath a silver sky. The staircase opened onto a beach of smooth stones that hummed when touched. Each step released a note, like playing a lullaby with your body. You walked to the edge of the water. The sea was not sea, it was made of quiet light, rolling in slow waves that never broke, only folded endlessly into themselves. The stars above danced in slow spirals, casting shimmering trails that dipped into the waves and returned, like fishing lines of the cosmos. A chair waited for you near the water, carved from driftwood and covered in a blanket made of woven wind. You sat. The sea kept breathing. The sky kept spinning. And you, wrapped in that moment, began to dissolve into stillness, into softness, into dream. You did not notice the moment the waves stopped rolling or when the stars began to hum in place. The world around you paused, not in fear, not in warning, but in perfect peace. The chair beneath you gently tilted back, cradling your body like a hammock woven from trust. A warm breeze carried the scent of something deeply familiar, something like the inside of an old book and a hug you forgot you remembered. Your eyes closed, but you still saw everything, the starlight painting soft arcs above, the sea turning inwards into itself, the patterns on the sand unfolding like maps of old feelings. You floated there, suspended between moments. And then, the tide shifted gently beneath you, not carrying you away, but welcoming you further in. When you opened your eyes, you were no longer on the beach but in a greenhouse of glass and silk. Plants you'd never seen before curled upward, their petals unfolding to show soft lights and soft sounds. One plant unfurled and played a music box melody made of wind and bells. Another glowed gently when you looked at it, casting the memory of your favorite voice across the walls. A fountain bubbled in the center, not with water but with golden mist, and as it rose and fell, the light caught it just right to reveal faint silhouettes inside, dancers, perhaps, or stories in motion. You dipped your fingers into it and felt not wetness but warmth, the kind that comes from long-held forgiveness. In the far corner of the greenhouse stood a door, rounded like an egg, and without hesitation, you walked through it. Beyond was a forest made entirely of sleep. The trees swayed though there was no wind. Their leaves blinked like eyelids. The moss pulsed slowly beneath your feet, in time with your breath. Above you, the stars were closer than ever, and some floated between the branches like soft fireflies with no need to glow. You passed a small pond where instead of water, dreams floated on the surface, snippets of laughter, a ribbon trailing from a kite, someone singing to themselves while folding laundry, a memory you didn't know you had of holding hands in perfect silence. You knelt beside the pond and it mirrored your reflection not as you are, but as you feel. It smiled at you. You smiled back. A path appeared, lined with low lanterns, each one breathing gently, flickering as if they were waiting for you and no one else. You followed it until the trees thinned and opened onto a quiet hill. On top stood a small observatory with windows shaped like teardrops turned upside down. You entered, and inside, the ceiling gave way to the sky entirely. No glass, no roof, only stars. A telescope sat unused in the middle of the room, not aimed anywhere in particular. You sat beside it on a wide cushion, and without needing to look through the lens, you saw everything. A comet passing with a trail like spilled glitter. A planet rotating slowly, its oceans calm. A distant galaxy that pulsed in time with your heartbeat. You lay down. The stars moved across your skin like projected light, and you let the rhythm of their dance rock you. Somewhere in the distance, a music box began to play, but instead of notes, it played memories of peace. Walking through fog with nowhere to be, watching rain slide down windows in the late afternoon, the moment before falling asleep when your body becomes weightless. The floor beneath you shifted, and suddenly you were adrift again, but not lost. Only floating, deeper into this dream. You floated for a while without needing to know where you were going. The air around you was warm and still, the kind of stillness that feels like someone's arms around you. There was no ground, no sky, just layers of light and mist that held your shape like a lullaby woven into fabric. And then, slowly, the world formed again, not all at once, but in pieces. A floor appeared beneath your feet, soft as memory. Walls rose around you like breath rising in a quiet chest. You were inside a small room with no corners, just curved edges that hummed gently. The walls glowed like paper lanterns. In the center was a bed made of feathers and fog. But you didn't lie down. You walked to the window and looked out. Outside, a city of floating bridges stretched across clouds. The buildings drifted just above the surface, tethered by silver ropes to nothing you could see. People passed by in slow motion, smiling gently, carrying books that read themselves aloud in soft voices. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime sang in a key only the soul could understand. You stepped through the window without falling, just a gentle step into the dreamscape beyond. The bridges swayed beneath your feet, but you felt no fear. They knew your weight. They knew your rhythm. Below, the clouds curled into shapes that shifted with your thoughts, a teacup, a lantern, a hand reaching out and then folding softly into mist again. You passed through doorways made of hanging beads, of leaves, of strands of time itself. Each one brought you into a different dream. A hallway where clocks ran backward and whispered secrets in tick-tock language. A garden where stars bloomed instead of flowers and closed each time you blinked. A library where instead of books, dreams were bottled and shelved by mood. You uncorked one and smelled the scent of sun on skin and a breeze that carried laughter down a street you'd never been but somehow knew. In one room, a painting turned to look at you. It didn't speak, but its eyes told you a story of someone finding peace in the middle of a quiet forest, sitting alone but never feeling lonely. You stood with it for a while, your hand resting on the cool glass of the frame. Then you moved on. A staircase unfurled before you like ribbon, and as you walked up it, you passed through layers of music, notes hanging like lanterns in the air, chords folding around your shoulders like a shawl. At the top, the air opened into a terrace garden, suspended above everything. Soft hammocks swayed between low trees. Cushions lined the floor like stepping stones. You sat beneath a tree that smelled of warm milk and old stories. Birds with feathers like parchment nested above you, each one sleeping with their beaks tucked under their wings. One stirred as you settled in, opened a single eye, then blinked and returned to dreaming. You leaned back. The breeze ran gentle fingers through your hair. Somewhere far below, a bell rang once, not an ending, just a soft reminder that you were still being held. A cloud passed through the terrace, cool and damp and full of the scent of distant thunder. You smiled without meaning to. There was nothing here to do. Nothing to chase. Only this, the softness of being. You let your eyes close, just for a moment, and when you opened them again, the world had tilted softly once more. The garden had shifted into something quieter, deeper. The sky above you now shimmered with shifting colors, lavender melting into gold, indigo curling around pale rose. It wasn't daytime or night, just a gentle in-between, where the edges of time blur into something safe. You stood, and the tree above you rustled as if in farewell. Petals fell, not from flowers, but from the sky itself, slow and weightless. As they landed, each one became a soft light that sank into the floor, leaving the path glowing gently before your feet. You followed it, deeper into this new realm, where houses floated upside down, and rivers ran through the air like ribbons. The water didn't fall, it swayed slowly, catching stars in its current and leaving trails of light behind. A bridge of sleeping lily pads curved gently across the sky river. You walked across them, and they didn't stir. Some opened slightly beneath your steps, revealing tiny lanterns inside. Each one flickered a color you'd never seen before, a new hue made of emotions not yet named. On the other side, a long hallway awaited. It was lined with windows, but the windows didn't look out, they looked in. As you passed each one, you glimpsed moments from dreams that hadn't happened yet, you standing in a forest of candle trees, you walking through a marketplace where people traded laughter in tiny glass jars, you sailing on a boat that ran on sighs and the sound of distant flutes. None of these moments frightened you. They simply waited. Patient, like books unopened on a shelf. The hallway ended in a room made entirely of pillows. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling, all plush and yielding. You sat, then lay back, and immediately the pillows shaped themselves to your form. Music swelled softly, not from an instrument, but from the fabric itself, a lullaby made of softness and memory. As you listened, you felt your heartbeat slow to match its rhythm. For the first time in forever, your body felt completely at rest, not just still, but deeply unwound, like a ribbon released from a tight knot. You stayed there, not sleeping, not thinking, just gently becoming part of the quiet. Eventually, the room began to glow. Not with light, but with readiness. A hush wrapped around you like a shawl, and you rose again, stepping through a curtain made of falling stars. Beyond it was a forest, but not of trees. Of dream catchers, tall and swaying in the breeze, each one the size of a doorway. They spun slowly, catching glimmers in their woven threads. You passed through one and felt your thoughts stretch like silk. You passed through another and the weight on your chest softened into mist. A third dream catcher shimmered as you stepped through it, and you were wrapped in the memory of someone humming in another room while you drifted off long ago. At the center of this forest stood a great mirror. Not one that reflected your image, but your stillness. You looked into it and saw not yourself, but the space where fear used to live, now empty and clean. The mirror did not speak, but you heard its silence and understood. When you stepped away, the trees began to fade, and with them the forest of dream catchers, replaced by a path that spiraled upward like a gentle staircase of clouds. You followed it slowly, feet light, heart soft, until the stars above grew larger, closer, brighter. Until you were walking not under the sky, but through it. The stars no longer sat above you but surrounded you entirely, floating like dandelion seeds in the dark. Each one pulsed softly, never blinking, only breathing light into the quiet. As you walked, they gently drifted out of your path, making room for your steps without resistance. Some brushed against your arms, leaving warmth behind, like a hand touched briefly in passing. The ground was no longer visible beneath you, but your feet found footing all the same, carried by a road that formed just ahead of every step and dissolved behind. You weren't lost. You were being gently delivered, like a note passed in the quiet of a classroom. Soon, the stars began to arrange themselves into shapes, floating chairs, open books, a swing that rocked slowly even with no one upon it. You paused before one cluster of stars shaped like a table set for tea. The cups and teapot glowed faintly, and when you stepped closer, one chair pulled itself out as though waiting for you. You sat, and the teapot tipped on its own, filling your cup with a light that smelled like jasmine and honey. You sipped it and tasted stillness. No sugar. No bitterness. Just warmth in its most honest form. As you drank, the stars around the table pulsed gently, forming into slow-moving memories of people who had once spoken to you in kindness. Some you recognized. Others you didn't. But their words floated in the air like paper boats, drifting gently into the sky above you where they unfolded into small bursts of soft light. When you stood, the table melted away like fog at sunrise, and the stars scattered again, leaving you with the gentle hush of their retreat. Ahead, a staircase appeared, not of stone or wood, but made entirely of music. Each step sang as you placed your foot upon it. Soft piano notes, a violin's breath, the deep hum of a cello far away. The music wrapped around your body like a blanket stitched from forgotten lullabies. As you climbed, the air grew warmer, not hotter, but closer, like leaning against someone who understands everything you don't say aloud. At the top of the staircase was a small room made entirely of moonlight. Its walls pulsed with silver rhythm. In the center stood a cradle, but not for a baby, for a feeling. You stepped inside and lay down, and immediately the cradle rocked with the gentlest motion, side to side, as if the whole world had paused just to hold you. Above, the ceiling shimmered with gentle constellations, and each star blinked a message you couldn't translate but still understood. Around you, the air carried the sound of deep waves moving miles away, the rustle of pages turning, the soft breath of someone sleeping nearby. The cradle continued its slow, endless rocking, and your limbs felt heavier, as if gravity had decided to hold you more tenderly tonight. You weren't falling asleep, you were being woven into sleep, gently, one thread at a time. You didn't need to move. You didn't need to remember. You didn't need to finish anything. This was a place without ends. Without musts. Without sharp corners. Only softness. Only now. Only here. And as the rocking slowed, your thoughts folded like clean sheets in a quiet house. The stars above faded just slightly, dimming into comfort. The world around you no longer waited. It simply held you. And in that stillness, in that soft breath between dreams, you let go completely. You drifted in a warmth so complete it erased the idea of edges. There was no more before or after, only this soft middle where your thoughts quieted like birds at dusk. The cradle gently melted away, and you found yourself resting on a patch of sky that no longer needed to be above or below. It simply was. Around you, the clouds folded like cotton, drifting in spirals that pulsed in slow harmony with your breath. Somewhere far away, a wind carried a voice humming a tune without words. The sound wrapped around you like a ribbon. As you sat up, you noticed a path formed from floating pages, each one curling and unrolling just ahead of your steps. The words on them changed as you walked. Some were wishes, others were apologies. Some were questions you never asked aloud, and some were answers that had always been waiting in silence. You followed the paper path toward a horizon that shimmered like glass being warmed by the sun. The light didn't glare, it glowed, soft and golden, as if the world had saved its gentlest hour just for you. You came to a field of enormous flowers, their petals white as blankets, their colors muted like old memories. Some leaned toward you as you passed, nodding softly, and a few opened in slow spirals, revealing pools of warm light in their centers. One flower held a memory so old it had no name, only a feeling, of being small, but never alone. You stayed a while in that place, lying beneath a sky woven from sighs, your fingers trailing through grasses that sparkled like morning frost. The longer you stayed, the more the earth below seemed to breathe with you, matching your pace. Eventually, you rose and followed a narrow trail into a grove where trees sang in harmony, not with music, but with breath. The sound they made was like old curtains shifting in a breeze, or the gentle rustle of someone turning in sleep. Each tree had a door carved into its bark, and as you passed them, some opened to reveal quiet scenes. A cup being filled beside a rainy window, the hush of snow landing on stone, a child being wrapped in a warm towel after a bath. None of these belonged to you exactly, but you felt welcome in all of them. They were the universal softnesses, the moments that made the world gentle. One tree opened and inside was a staircase lined with candles. You stepped through the doorway and descended slowly, the flames flickering with colors you'd never seen before, shades of memory, tones of comfort. At the bottom was a room filled with pillows and low light. A cat slept beside a fireplace that flickered with golden coals, though no fire would burn. The cat opened one eye, purred once, and returned to sleep. You lay beside it, and the warmth of its fur sank into your bones. Outside, the world continued to turn, slow and tender. The room wrapped itself around you, and your body remembered how to let go. You didn't think of tomorrow. You didn't need to. You only felt the now, and it held you without asking for anything in return. The firelight dimmed, not from dying out, but from deepening into a softer glow. The cat remained curled beside you, its purr vibrating gently through the floor, syncing with the rhythm of your own breath. You stayed there for a while, still and safe, until the room began to shift. The pillows beneath you dissolved like morning mist, and the floor turned to a slow-moving stream of stars. You did not sink. You floated, your body as light as a feather, as quiet as a held breath. The current carried you gently into another space, a dome filled with slowly circling lanterns. Each one floated like a balloon, tethered not by string but by memory. You touched one as it drifted past, and a scene blossomed inside, a cozy room filled with laughter, soft voices layered over the clinking of dishes and the rustle of pages. Another lantern drifted close, revealing a quiet afternoon beneath a tree, the kind where time stretches and folds around you like a warm shawl. You didn't take the lanterns with you. You only passed among them, each one offering something gentle, something whole. A soft staircase emerged, not rising or falling but curling inward like the spiral of a shell. As you moved through it, you began to hear faint whispers, not words, but tones, like lullabies spoken without sound. The walls breathed around you, dimming and glowing in a rhythm so slow it felt eternal. At the top of the spiral, a curtain of light waited, soft as gauze. You passed through it and stepped into a room with no floor, no walls, no ceiling, only floating. The air was thick with the scent of rain before it falls, and a warmth like blankets just pulled from the dryer. You looked down, or maybe it was up, and saw constellations forming beneath your feet. They blinked slowly, patterns unfolding and fading again, like memories being told and retold in a loving voice. Somewhere above, or within, you heard music. Not a melody, but the texture of music, the hum of a story being told without words. You drifted toward the sound, and as you moved, the air thickened with peace. You arrived in a circular space lined with mirrors that did not reflect your body, but your calm. In one, you saw yourself sitting beneath a tree with someone whose face you couldn't remember, but whose presence wrapped around you like light. In another, you were floating on your back in a quiet lake, stars above and below. In the third, you were simply sleeping, held gently by nothing but air and warmth. The mirrors folded inward, wrapping around you like petals. The floor became a field of velvet, and a gentle wind stirred, bringing with it a scent like warm tea and clean sheets. In the center of the space, a chair waited, not to be sat in, but simply to exist. You touched it, and a slow vibration moved through your fingertips, up your arms, into your chest, until your entire body hummed with the softest kind of stillness. A hush settled over everything. Then the voice returned, not a voice you heard, but one you felt. It said nothing, and yet everything in you knew what it meant. You are safe. You are home. There is nothing left to do. You sat again, not because you were tired, but because stillness had invited you. And in that stillness, you began to drift, not outward, but inward, toward the center of peace. The drifting wasn't movement but release, like a feather loosening from its thread, or a deep sigh you hadn't realized you were holding. The space around you folded inward again, not to confine you but to cradle you, drawing you gently towards something that had no shape but felt like comfort. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet where even thought takes a breath. You closed your eyes, not to shut the world out, but because the world had become soft enough to carry you without needing your attention. When you opened them again, you were floating in a sky that shimmered with muted color, like water stained with light. Around you, islands drifted in the air, some tiny as leaves, others large enough to hold cities made of clouds and glass. You reached out toward one, and it moved closer on its own, offering itself like a hand. You stepped onto its surface, which felt neither solid nor soft, but something between, like walking on trust. The island had a small garden blooming with impossible plants. One flower opened only when you laughed. Another changed colors with your breath. A vine grew in slow loops around your arm, pulsing gently, then retreating like a cat curling back into its spot. In the center of the garden stood a tree with glowing fruit. Each fruit flickered softly with a different memory. You plucked one and held it in your palm. It showed you sitting quietly beneath a window as rain tapped the glass. No drama, no story, just peace. You placed the fruit gently back and continued on. A path of soft steps led through the trees, past stones carved with sleeping faces. As you passed them, they whispered in languages that didn't need translation. You felt the messages instead of hearing them. You've done enough. You can rest now. You are held. You are loved. You are whole. At the end of the path, a doorway stood alone. Not part of a building, not leading into anything visible, just a door. You touched it, and it opened without resistance, revealing a room filled with stars. They floated just above the floor, low and slow like bubbles in thick air. Each one emitted the quiet sound of something remembered. Laughter in the other room, footsteps on wood floors, the hush after a story ends. You stepped into the room, and the stars drifted toward you, wrapping around your limbs and your shoulders, their warmth pulsing like a heartbeat in time with your own. In the middle of the room was a circle of cushions, all facing inward. You sat at the center and the stars began to hum, a soft vibration like being wrapped in a familiar song. The cushions exhaled a long sigh, and you sighed with them. It was a room made of exhale. A place where everything you carried was slowly unspooled and placed beside you, not taken away, not erased, just gently removed from your arms so you could rest. A new light formed above you, not bright, not blinding, just warm. It reached down like an open hand and cupped your face without touch. Your eyes fluttered closed. A breeze moved through your thoughts, clearing the dust of the day. And in that moment, you felt yourself become part of the room. Not separate. Not watching. Just present, like a note held at the end of a song. Time no longer passed in this space, it softened. It didn't tick or shift or push. It simply breathed. You lay on the cushions now, without remembering how or when you lay down. The stars above dimmed ever so slightly, not fading, but settling, the way a mother might dim a lamp before tucking you in. The cushions beneath you were no longer separate shapes. They had melted together into a nest of warmth that rose to meet the curve of your back and cradled your limbs without pressing. Every part of you was supported. Every part of you was allowed. A soft hum started from the edge of the room and slowly moved inward. It was not music, not exactly, but the echo of something soothing. It reminded you of being carried, of rocking in someone's arms while their voice rose and fell in a song meant only for you. The hum gathered around your head and chest, and your breath began to follow it without thought. You didn't need to focus on breathing anymore. The dream was breathing for you now. As the glow above shifted, a dome of images appeared, slow and vast. You saw skies you'd never flown under, oceans that sparkled with stars instead of salt. Mountains that pulsed gently like lungs. A vast desert where wind sang through the dunes like a choir. You watched not as a guest, but as if the dream had saved these places for you. They weren't memories, and yet you felt like you'd lived them already, long ago in some version of yourself who'd always known how to sleep, how to let go. The dome above you began to open, peeling back layer by layer until all that remained was a sky made of silk and snow. From it drifted soft flakes of light, each one smaller than a breath, each one melting before it touched you, leaving only a sense of peace behind. You didn't reach out to catch them. You didn't need to. They found you on their own, brushing gently against your cheeks, your fingers, your chest. The air was cool now, but not cold. It was the temperature of rest, of old lullabies sung beside a night light, of being pulled into a soft blanket while the world gently continued on without you. And then, from far beneath, you heard the deep, slow sound of a bell, not sharp, not loud. Just a gentle chime that rippled through the dream like a hand smoothing wrinkled sheets. It rang once, then paused, then again. With each sound, your thoughts quieted more. Not emptied, just stilled. The bell didn't ask anything of you. It didn't signal an ending. Only a soft turning inward, as if your very soul was curling into itself like a cat preparing to sleep. You turned slightly, not because you needed to, but because your body had found its most comfortable shape. The cushions shifted to match it perfectly. A low breeze moved through the room, carrying the scent of something beloved, something you couldn't quite name, but that made your chest ache with comfort. Like remembering someone who always made you feel safe. Like standing in a place where you once laughed without even meaning to. The stars above flickered one last time. Then they dimmed to the color of breath. And everything, every thought, every story, every part of you, was allowed to rest. You felt yourself drifting even deeper now, not downward or away, but inward, toward a place at the center of your being that had never been touched by noise or worry. It was soft here, quieter than silence. Not empty, but full of something slower than thought, deeper than memory. Your body, still and weightless, no longer carried the edges of tension it once held. Even your breath had slowed into the rhythm of dream itself, drawn out and feather-light, as though the very air around you had learned to breathe on your behalf. Somewhere beyond the walls of your resting place, if there were still walls at all, you sensed gentle movement. It was not something coming for you, not something calling your name. It was simply the dream continuing to unfold, the way rivers keep flowing long after you've stepped out of their current. You felt no need to follow. There was no path to walk. You were not missing anything. Here, in this moment, nothing was waiting. Nothing was expected. Nothing needed to be changed. And so the dream wrapped tighter, not to hold you down, but to tuck you in. The softest parts of your mind began to stir like snow falling into deeper snow, no noise, no shape, just layers of quiet finding each other. Around you, light pulsed through the air like the last embers of a long-loved fire. You couldn't see it now, not clearly, but you could feel it brushing against you in slow, spiraling motions. It didn't warm you like sunlight or heat. It comforted you like a thought remembered just before sleep. You turned, very slightly, without urgency. Your limbs floated without needing effort, guided by some unseen current that moved like kindness. With eyes half-lidded, you saw that the room had gently changed. There were floating lanterns now, high above, and they drifted in slow circles like sleepwalking stars. Below them, low shelves curved around the edges of the space, each one lined with small bottles and jars, glowing faintly in shades of pearl and ash rose. They held nothing material, just dreams that had already been dreamt, resting now, content. You touched one and it opened without sound, spilling the feeling of rain against glass and the weight of warm socks on cold floors. You closed it gently, and the jar pulsed in gratitude. None of it asked to be remembered. None of it wanted to be held on to. All of it simply was, and that was enough. A large cushion emerged at the center again, as though it had always been there, simply waiting for you to notice. You returned to it without thinking. Your body nestled into its folds, and the dream curled around you once more, sighing with your breath. The last lights above faded into silver fog. And the world, in its final softness, began to hush entirely. Thoughts no longer came in words. They came in sensations, a soft breeze against your cheek, the weight of sleep pulling gently at your knees, the fading echo of a name you loved. There were no stories to hold anymore. Only this quiet rhythm that came from somewhere older than time. The lullaby of stillness. And just before you crossed fully into sleep, you heard it, just once. A voice like velvet, softer than air, whispering, "You're safe now. Rest easy." And then the dream carried you, weightless, into the night.